August 27th, 2023, 6:14 a.m. Robotyne, Zaporizhzhia Oblast. 12 Ukrainian tanks advanced toward Russian defensive lines. Leopard 2s, T-72s, mix of Western and Soviet armor. Objective: breach fortified positions, create gap for exploitation, enable follow-on forces to advance. Cost: 40 million in armored vehicles. 8 tanks destroyed or disabled. 34 crew members dead. 51 wounded. Gain: 400 meters of territory. 1 breach in Russian defensive line. Temporary tactical advantage. This is Iron Bullet. And what you're about to see isn't just one attack. It's the mathematics of modern offensive warfare. The brutal calculus where human lives, expensive machines, and tactical objectives get converted into equations. Where success and failure exist simultaneously. Where victory costs more than the ground is worth. The question isn't whether the attack succeeded. It did. The Russian position was taken. The line was breached. The question is whether 400 meters justifies 34 dead soldiers and 8 destroyed tanks worth $40 million. And the answer to that question depends entirely on what happened in the 6 hours after the breakthrough. In what came next. In what that 400 meters enabled. Stay with me, because the detail that determines whether this attack was genius or waste, whether the cost was acceptable or catastrophic, isn't in the assault itself. It's in what Ukrainian forces did with the opportunity those 34 soldiers died creating. The official assessment calls this limited tactical success with acceptable losses. Military language, sanitized, professional. The reality is that 12 tank crews drove into hell. 8 didn't come back. The 4 that survived are still processing what they saw, what they did, what it cost. And whether it mattered, let's establish what a breakthrough operation actually means, what it requires, what it costs. Modern defensive positions aren't just trenches and wire. They're layered systems. First line, observation posts and light infantry. Second line, fighting positions with anti-tank weapons. Third line, heavy weapons and artillery support. Behind all of it, minefields, obstacles, pre-registered fire zones. Breaking through means defeating all layers, sequentially, while under fire, while taking casualties, while maintaining momentum enough to exploit before the defense reconsolidates. It's the hardest operation in modern warfare. Attackers need 3.1 numerical advantage minimum, often 5.1. Even then, success isn't guaranteed. Casualties are guaranteed. Ukrainian forces at Robotyne don't have 3.1 advantage. They have rough parity, maybe slight numerical edge in specific sectors, but not overwhelming force, not enough to guarantee breakthrough. So they use what they have: 12 tanks supporting infantry, artillery preparation, drone reconnaissance, NATO training, tactical competence, against Russian defensive belt prepared over 16 months, minefields extending hundreds of meters, dragon's teeth obstacles, fortified bunkers, pre-sighted artillery, ATGM teams in depth. The mathematics don't favor attackers, but the strategic situation demands offensive action. Western aid requires demonstrating progress, political pressure, military necessity, so they attack, not because victory is certain, because staying defensive isn't acceptable. August 27th, 5:30 a.m. Artillery preparation begins. Ukrainian guns fire on Russian positions. Counter-battery fire suppresses Russian artillery. Standard procedure. 40 minutes of preparation fires. The shells impact. Russian positions take damage. Some casualties. Some suppression. but prepared defenses absorb artillery. Dugouts, bunkers, depth. You can't destroy entrenched positions with artillery alone. You soften them. You suppress them. Then infantry and armor must close and destroy them. 6:14 a.m. Artillery leaves. 12 tanks advance. Infantry follows in armored vehicles. Mine-clearing vehicles lead. Standard combined arms assault. Minefields start immediately, not random mines. Planned obstacles integrated with fields of fire. The mine-clearing vehicles find lanes. Mark them. The tanks advance through cleared paths. Russian response, artillery. Not on the tanks, on the marked lanes. They've pre-registered these coordinates. They know where attackers must advance. They target the lanes. First Ukrainian tank hit at 6:19 a.m. Leopard 2E6. Mine damage to track. Immobilized. Crew stays with vehicle. Attempts field repair. Russian artillery fires on position. Direct hit. Tank destroyed. Crew killed. This happens in 5 minutes. The attack is 9 minutes old. 1 tank lost. 11 remain. They continue advancing, because that's what breakthrough doctrine demands. You don't stop for casualties. You maintain momentum, or the attack fails and everyone dies anyway. 6:24 a.m. Second minefield, deeper into Russian defensive zone. More sophisticated obstacles. The mine-clearing vehicles work methodically, too slowly. The tanks are exposed, stationary, waiting. Russian ATGM team engages. Cornet missile, 2,100 meters, target stationary T-72. Penetration. Fire. Crew evacuates. 3 wounded. 1 dead. Tank abandoned. 2 tanks lost. 10 remain. They're not at the Russian first fighting line yet. Still advancing through obstacle zone. This is the grinder. This is where attacks die. Not in dramatic tank-on-tank combat. In methodical attrition while crossing minefields under artillery and ATGM fire. 6:31 a.m. Third tank hit. Leopard 2, artillery strike. Mobility kill. Track destroyed. Crew evacuates. Tank left behind. Repairable later if position can be held. If 9 tanks reach Russian first defensive line. 17 minutes into assault. 3 tanks lost crossing obstacles. 25% losses before engaging main defensive positions. The mathematics are bad. Attackers need overwhelming force. They're already degraded. But they continue. Because tactical logic says retreat now. All losses are waste. Continue, maybe achieve objective. First defensive line, Russian infantry in prepared position. Anti-tank weapons, machine guns. They engage Ukrainian infantry advancing with tanks. The fight is close, brutal. Direct fire, grenades. The tanks provide supporting fire. 120mm and 125mm rounds into bunkers and trenches. Ukrainian infantry takes casualties, but they're trained. They're motivated. They close with Russian positions, suppress, flank, destroy. The combination of tank fire and infantry assault overwhelms first line. 6:47 a.m. First defensive line breached. Russian forces retreat to second line. Ukrainian tanks advance. 6 remain. 3 more destroyed in close combat. Mines, RPGs, 1 ATGM hit. Half the assault force gone. Objective not yet achieved. 6 tanks. Supporting infantry. Pushing forward. This is the moment. The critical decision point. Press forward with degraded force or consolidate gains and await reinforcement. Ukrainian commander chooses continue. The breakthrough window is narrow. Minutes, not hours. Exploit now or lose momentum forever. 6 tanks advance toward second defensive line. This one is stronger, better prepared. The Russians know breakthrough is possible. They're reinforcing, bringing up reserves. Artillery intensified. 7:03 a.m. Ukrainian tanks reach second line. Engage Russian positions. The fighting is desperate. 2 more tanks destroyed. 4 remain. But Ukrainian infantry is still effective. They're clearing positions, using tanks as mobile artillery, methodically destroying Russian fighting positions, taking casualties, but advancing. 7:31 a.m. Second defensive line breached. 4 Ukrainian tanks survive, roughly 1/3 of assault force. Behind them, 8 destroyed tanks, 34 dead, 51 wounded. In front, Russian third line, an open ground where exploitation should happen. Should, if forces were available, if losses were lighter, if momentum could be maintained. Ukrainian commander assesses 4 tanks, depleted infantry, no immediate reinforcements. The breach exists, but exploiting requires fresh forces. Mobile reserves, they aren't here. Not yet. 7:44 a.m. Ukrainian forces consolidate position. 4 surviving tanks form defensive perimeter. Infantry digs in. They hold 400 meters of territory beyond the start line. The breach is real, but narrow, vulnerable. Russian counterattack is inevitable. The assault is over. Success. Failure. Both. Neither. The territory is held. Objective achieved, but at catastrophic cost. 2/3 of assault force destroyed. Can those losses be justified? This is where most analysis stops. Count gains, count losses, calculate ratio, declare success or failure based on mathematics, but that analysis is incomplete. Because breakthrough operations aren't valuable for the ground taken. They're valuable for what they enable, for what comes next. And what came next at Robotyne was 6 hours of confusion, adaptation, and eventual exploitation that nobody expected. Let me show you what the initial reports missed. 7:45 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Ukrainian artillery shifts fire, not supporting assault anymore, interdicting Russian logistics, supply routes, reinforcement paths, preventing counterattack before exploitation forces arrive. Russian forces attempt to counterattack anyway. Local reserves, ad hoc task forces. They advance toward the breach. Ukrainian artillery destroys them in approach march. The Russian commanders can't get forces to the breach. Not in strength, not coordinated. This detail matters. The 4 surviving tanks aren't just holding ground. They're preventing Russian reconsolidation. They're keeping the breach open. 8:30 a.m. to 10:15 a.m. Ukrainian follow-on forces arrive. Fresh infantry, more armor, engineers. They exploit through the breach the initial assault created. They expand the penetration, left and right. They attack Russian positions from flanks and rear. Russian defensive line begins collapsing. Not everywhere, just this sector, but collapse nonetheless. Positions that were impregnable from the front become untenable when attacked from behind. 10:15 a.m. to 1 p.m. Ukrainian forces expand breakthrough to 1,200 meters width, penetrate 2,400 meters depth. 3 Russian defensive positions overrun. Approximately 400 Russian casualties. Significant equipment losses. This is what the initial 400-meter breach enabled. This is what 8 destroyed tanks and 34 dead soldiers purchased. Not just 400 meters. The operational opportunity to fracture Russian defensive belt in this sector. 1 p.m. Ukrainian forces consolidate expanded positions. Russian forces retreat to fallback lines. The breakthrough is complete. Not just tactical penetration. Operational disruption. Now do the mathematics. Was it worth it? 8 Ukrainian tanks destroyed. Value, roughly 40 million. 34 crew killed. 51 wounded. 100 plus supporting infantry casualties. Total human cost, approximately 200 casualties. Russian losses, estimated 400-600 casualties. 15-20 armored vehicles destroyed. 3 defensive positions lost. Operational line disrupted. Reserves committed and destroyed. Strategic position compromised. Loss exchange ratio, roughly 1.2.5 in Russia's favor on equipment. Roughly 1.2.5 in Ukraine's favor on casualties. Territorial gain, operationally significant. Strategic impact, moderate. The question remains, worth it? There's no clean answer, because the value depends on what follows. If Ukrainian forces exploit further, disrupt Russian logistics, force operational withdrawal, yes, worth it. If Russian forces reconsolidate, counterattack successfully, retake positions, no. Waste. The value of offensive operations isn't determined in the attack, it's determined in the exploitation. And exploitation success depends on factors beyond the initial assault: reserves, logistics, enemy reaction, weather, terrain, strategic context. August 27th established that Ukrainian forces can breach Russian defenses at high cost, but successfully. What matters is whether that capability translates to operational advantage. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. Was the attack worth the cost? Tactically, yes. The breach succeeded. Follow-on forces exploited. Operational gains exceeded initial losses. Strategically uncertain. Long-term value depends on whether subsequent operations build on this success or whether Russian forces eventually restore position. The attack alone doesn't answer the question. The campaign does. What determines success in breakthrough operations? Not the breach itself, the exploitation. Breaches that aren't exploited are tactical victories with no operational value, casualties for temporary gains. The Robotyne breach was exploited successfully within 6 hours. That exploitation justified the initial cost. Barely. What's the actual mathematics of modern offensive warfare? Brutal. Attackers need massive force advantage or accept massive casualties. Technology doesn't eliminate this. Training helps, but fundamentally, breaching prepared defenses costs more than defending them. The equation hasn't changed since World War I, just the specific numbers. Breakthrough operations remain the most expensive tactic in modern warfare. You pay in lives and equipment. The question is whether you get value equal to the cost. The lesson from Robotyne isn't that breakthrough operations work or don't work. It's that they work only when exploitation follows. The initial assault is just the entry price. The real operation is what comes after. Ukrainian forces at Robotyne paid entry price, 8 tanks, 34 lives. Then they exploited. That exploitation made the cost justifiable. Not cheap, not easy, not desirable, but justifiable within context of strategic necessity. Would it have been worth it without exploitation? No. 8 tanks and 34 lives for 400 meters that gets retaken is waste. Pure waste. The difference between success and waste was the 6 hours after the breach. The follow-on forces, the expanded penetration, the operational disruption. That's the hidden variable in breakthrough operations. Not whether you can breach, whether you can exploit. Ukrainian forces could do both. That's why the operation succeeded despite horrific costs. This is Iron Bullet. We analyzed the battles that changed wars, and Robotyne didn't change the war. It demonstrated that Ukrainian forces can execute combined arms breaches against prepared Russian defenses at approximately 25 to 35% loss rates, with successful exploitation if follow-on forces are available. That's not war-winning capability. but its war-sustaining capability. It proves offensive operations are possible. Expensive, bloody, but possible. The fields around Robotyne are scarred. Wrecked vehicles, shell craters, minefields still being cleared. Evidence of what breakthrough operations costing in 2023. The 4 surviving tanks from the initial assault were repaired and returned to service. Different crews. The originals were too depleted. Some wounded, some dead, some just too traumatized to continue immediately. Those 4 tanks didn't win the battle alone, but they held the breach long enough for exploitation forces to arrive. That's their value. Not killing enemies, enabling follow-on operations. Subscribe to Iron Bullet. Because in modern warfare, tactical success means nothing without operational exploitation. And operational exploitation requires the resources most militaries can sustain. 34 soldiers died breaching 400 meters of defensive line. Their deaths mattered only because follow-on forces exploited the breach they created. Without exploitation, they died for nothing. With exploitation, they died achieving operational objective. That's the mathematics. Brutal, honest, unavoidable. If you think modern offensive warfare is sustainable at these loss rates, type Iron Bullet in the comments. If you think defensive warfare has permanent advantage, tell me how attackers ever win. Because the paradox defines current battlefield. Defense is stronger than offense, but wars aren't won by defense alone. Someone must attack eventually. An attack means accepting Robotyne level losses for meter by meter gains. That's not strategy anyone wants. It's strategy necessity forces. Ukraine must attack to retake territory. Russia must defend to hold positions. Neither side can avoid their role. So the grinder continues. $40 million, 8 tanks, 34 lives, 400 meters. The price of offensive warfare in 2023. Not unique to Robotyne. Repeated across the entire front. Every attack, every breakthrough attempt. Same mathematics, same brutal cost. The only variable is whether exploitation follows. At Robotyne, it did. The cost was justified. Barely. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. Stay vigilant.